Mythgard Academy class. Sorry I was a couple minutes late there. Had a little technical glitch briefly, but I got it sorted out, so we're all set. Welcome to our special one-shot Mythgard Academy class on Isaac Asimov's Nightfall. So this is oh, Arthur, there's not a separate chat room set up. If you guys want to chat, you can use the one on the dispossessed room. So let me explain for those of you who are new. The chat interface that you see on your webinar screen is for communicating with me if you have observations, and I encourage you to be making observations as we go through passages in the text. Also, if you want to make snarky comments and whatnot, you can also do that too. But anyway, so the chat is for communicating with me. If you guys want to talk amongst yourselves also while the class is going on, we have a place for that. If you go to mythgard.org and under the Academy tab and the webpage for the Dispossessed class that is currently going on, then there's a chat room at the bottom, which is what we traditionally use for our regular class, and you're welcome to use that here this evening. So yeah, I think that's mostly what if you're new, mostly what you need to know. Talk with me here, talk with each other over there. Anyway, so oh no, April Cleaver read 77% of the novel instead. Yeah, I haven't read the novel, April, so I can't really talk about the novel. And it would have been a little bit unreasonable of me to ask everybody to read the novel in like the 1 week's warning that I gave people. But I hope you're enjoying the novel form. But anyway, yeah. Good. I'm glad you're liking the novel. We'll see. There you go. Okay, yeah. So, I'm glad. Actually, I didn't. I wasn't sure what to think about that. I saw that it had been novelized, and I was like, well, gosh. But okay, good. I mean, there certainly is room for expansion. I could see it becoming a novel, but I don't know. I also it extends after, so it doesn't just like expand the whole story into a novel, like the first chapter of the novel is the story. Really? That's how it works? Color me shocked. I would never have guessed that. And then it gets all post-apocalyptic? Oh, I don't know. Not a big fan of the concept. I mean, maybe it's awesome. I'm not judging, but my initial reaction there is kind of disappointment. I love the ending of the story. I mean, I love the way that this comes to an end. Yeah. I mean, we'll get there, but anyway. Okay, all right. So April, good. I'm glad. I was afraid when you said you'd only read 77% of the novel version that it meant that tonight's class was going to contain spoilers, which I would have felt modestly guilty about. But okay, all right, interesting. Anyway, okay, cool. Well, let me begin first, just with a little introduction and explanate. We have some special giveaways I'm going to do here tonight. That I want to explain to you guys. So let me explain all this. First of all, of course, I want to just begin by thanking you all. This bonus session is sort of a celebration of how awesome the Mythgard Academy is, and of course that means how awesome you guys are in your support of this program, both of course through your faithful attendance and participation. I have so enjoyed over the last 3 years interacting with you guys, both in the live sessions that we've had and by email with people who have been watching the classes out of sync or even a couple years later in many cases. It's just been a delightful environment, and I've so much enjoyed I've so much enjoyed doing this. It's one of the things that sometimes, as time has gone on, back at the beginning, when Mythgard was first founded and we were first getting Signum off the ground, I was doing a fair percentage of the teaching of our regular classes there, and I've been doing less of that lately. And some people who know me really well have been asking me, like, are you okay with that? Are you like, do you feel like you're losing your soul becoming an administrator, right? And not teaching, because of course teaching is what I've always loved. It's why I got into this whole thing in the first place. So to do less teaching and more administrating, whatever exactly that means, would seem a little bit like sort of soul destroying. But but my response is like, hey, I've got the Mythgard Academy, man. I'm good. Like I look forward every week to discussing with you guys. And so anyway, I wanted to thank you for that, and of course, thank you for your financial support. Sort of the fundraising efforts of Signum University started here. With the origin of the Mythgard Academy and the overwhelming support we got when we first floated the idea back in 2013. So I get so grateful for the donations you guys have given over the years, hoping that you guys will sort of continue in your support for the program so we can keep things running as we move forward. And just a quick reminder of where sort of what donating to Signum University sort of gets you, right? Sort of how it is that we express our gratitude for that. First, for Mythgard Academy stuff, of course, everyone who donates gets to vote. So those of you who are new or have kind of jumped into this late, I want to make sure everyone understands the process. This is I have almost no say into what books we actually do. These have all been chosen outside of my control. How this happens is first, books are nominated. Books or movies or shows are nominated. And everyone who donates $100 or more to Signum University Annual Fund over the course of the year gets invited to sit on our Council of the Wise if they would like. And that is the nominating council for the Mythgard Academy. So they make nominations and they have heated and interesting discussions about which books they want to do. And then they vote among themselves and decide on a panel, sort of a slate of finalists for everybody to vote on. And then all of the electorate, everybody who's made any kind of donation at all to the Signum Annual Fund, is invited to vote on which books they would like us to cover in the Mythgard Academy series. So you get voting rights if you donate $100 or more, and of course that can be done by a recurring donation. So if you give $8, $9, $10 a month, then of course that adds up to get you on the Council of the Wise as well, and then you get to participate in the nominating process as well. There are other things as well, like access to our classroom archives. If you're interested, if you've seen some of the classes that we've run before at Signum and are interested in maybe being able to get the recordings of those, we give those to our donors. Again, you can look at the donate page if you go to Signum University/fund. It lays out all that and exactly how that works. So anyway, in addition, I have two special things tonight, because as I said, tonight is sort of the celebration of the Mythgard Academy. So I want to thank you guys who were able to attend here tonight, and so I want to explain how this is going to work. So I got two special things. One, I'm going to do a drawing at the end of the class. Okay, so for everybody who has donated during the course of class tonight, I'm gonna do a drawing among all of tonight's donors. So all of you who donate to support the Mythgard Academy here during the class, you will get an entry, and I'm gonna put one entry, one little entry in the raffle bucket for every $25 you donate. Okay, and of course, like if you do a recurring donate, tonight, right now. Because there'll be other opportunities and other giveaways and things we'll do later on, but this is for what I'm going to explain. This is tonight. So for every $25 you donate, you get a little slip in the raffle bucket. Okay, a little ping pong ball in the raffle bucket. And at the end of the night, I'm gonna do a drawing, and the winner will receive. I just thought, I was thinking, it's the Mythgard Academy, I want to give you a book, right? And I was thinking, what book should I give them? And then I was like, wait, I know a good book. In fact, I know a good set of books, which, I don't know if they'll ever come in handy or anything, but I thought, just let's take a flyer on this. So I'm thinking, the boxed set of the History of the Lord of the Rings by J.R.R. Tolkien, right? just in case it might ever be handy. Again, don't know if the occasion might arise or not, but just in case it does, you would have it. So, the winner of the drawing is gonna get the History of the Lord of the Rings trilogy here. That is, of course, volume 6, 7, and 8 of the History of Middle-earth series. No, Tina, I'm totally not hinting. I like these books a whole lot. In fact, it was funny taking I pulled these volumes off my shelf a lot of times. This is the first time I've had the box set sitting there on my table for a while, and it was just kind of I was getting pleasant memories of the first time I found this. This is something I didn't order it online or anything. I actually saw it in a physical bookstore. It was really quaint 20th century experience, and it was one of those days where, as I was wont to do, I was kind of trailing along behind my wife, who was a wonderful browser. I'm not a good browser. I'm a good searcher, but not a great browser. Anyway, so I was kind of wandering around, and then just like on a display table was sitting the History of the Lord of the Rings, and I'd never seen it before. And it was one of those moments, like, the music swelled, and I went into slow motion, like running across the room towards the books. It was awesome. Wonderful. One of my favorite bookstore nights ever. Yeah. Anyway, okay. So that's one thing. So the one thing that we're going to do is the drawing. Now, the second thing that we're going to do is extra special. I'm going to do an auction. I'm going to offer something to auction off. Okay, and that is, again, this is tonight, between now and the end of class. The largest donation that is made tonight, with a minimum of $250. I will do a Mythgard Academy class on the work of your choice. You alone will get nominating and voting privileges. We're going to do, it's ideally another sort of one-shot like this. Ideally, sort of a short story or a film or a TV episode or something I can do in, not like a 12-part series, ideally. But yeah. So for the largest donor tonight, whoever that is, I will give you a day of my life, which is about a day or two of my life, about what these classes cost me in reading and planning and prepping and getting everything together. So, but that will be a lot of fun. So that's what's going on. So, and we're gonna do some. I'll do some sort of pausing. During the session here, let me paste this in. That's the link for our donation page, so you can access that. I'll check in, kind of give an update as we go through the class. Okay, the question I just got from Tom: if Curtis wins, why do Twilight? Totally. If Curtis wins and he insists on Twilight, I will do it. Yeah, absolutely. Why not? And one class sounds about right to cover the full meaty substance of Twilight. I think that sounds perfect. I have a hard time for talking for too much more than one class, but I mean, knowing me, actually, I probably wouldn't. But I've read Twilight before. I read it. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, A Christmas Carol. Good suggestion, Tony. That would be fun. I would actually really enjoy that. Okay. All right. Excellent. So, very good. Cool. All right. Can I see some donations starting to come in? That's wonderful. Some people are making suggestions. Excellent suggestions. Totally open. Doesn't have to be something I even know. I'll read something completely new. Watch a show I've never watched before. It's all good. Hey, in fact, I just did this today. I read this story. I read Nightfall for the first time. I'd heard of it, but I'd never read it. I read it for the first time day before yesterday, so I'm excited to talk about it here today. Firefly. Oh, Sharon. We'd have to choose a Firefly episode because there is no way I could cover Firefly in one class. I love Firefly. Um, one of the things I still have to thank my former undergraduate students for, who introduced me to Firefly. Um, but anyway, okay, all right. While we lots of people making good suggestions. I like it. Good suggestions. Those sound like fun. So um, let's get this. We have a qualifier already for the auction. So, right. It looks like right at just about 250. So that looks like where we're going to start for the auction. So, like I said, I'll keep you posted. We'll come back to that. Now, let's get to Nightfall, or I'm going to be here all day. So, okay. To begin with, right? This is true, of course, of really any work of fantasy or science fiction. One of the first questions to sort of ask about, right, is where are we? What's going on, right? To try to understand the world. And it's one of the things I'm always really particularly interested in, is to see how it is that the author introduces the world, right? What kind of things can we see? What can we learn? Again, not only about the sort of the details that we're told, but about the way it's introduced. What kind of relationship is the story establishing with us? By which I think I principally mean, what imaginative work is the story demanding of us, right? Because that's really the fun thing about fantasy and science fiction, right? That it's not taking things for granted, and it asks us not to take things for granted, and instead pushes us to imagine things in a sort of one way or another. So let's look at this. Where are we? Of the six sons, of course, as always, please do make observations. You're welcome to make observations as I read, and I'll come back to your comments as soon as I finish. But I always like to read the passages aloud. Of the six suns, only Beta is left in the sky. Do you see it? The question was rather unnecessary. Beta was almost at zenith, its ruddy light flooding the landscape to an unusual orange as the brilliant rays of setting Gamma died. Beta was at aphelion. It was small, smaller than Theramon had ever seen it before, and for the moment it was undisputed ruler of Lagash's sky. Lagash's own sun, Alpha, the one about which it revolved, was at the antipodes, as were the two distant companion pairs. The red dwarf Beta, Alpha's immediate companion, was alone, grimly alone. Aton's upturned face flushed redly in the sunlight. In just under 4 hours, he said, civilization as we know it comes to an end. It will do so because, as you see, Beta is the only sun in the sky. He smiled grimly. Print that. There'll be no one to read it. Okay, this isn't the very opening paragraph of the story, but it's, as you can go, quite near to it. What do we learn? Where are we? Okay, what do we get from this passage? So, of course, obviously, we get the basic framework, right? We understand about this is a planet that has 6 suns, right? And we see that they're named after the Greek letters, which is interesting, right? Sort of very orderly. It gives the impression, Arthur is suggesting a kind of a scientific feel from the beginning. I agree with that in a couple different ways, Arthur, but in particular, I think, to me, that the Greek lettering, right? Good, yeah, Arthur was pointing that out too. Suns named after Greek letters seems very scientist, right? And Arthur was saying that he feels that Asimov is first and foremost a scientist. It does seem like a very scientist thing to do, right? They're not named. They're not given personal names, right, or fanciful names, or mythic names, or anything like that. They're just lettered, right? Which is interesting, right? Wes Shantz points out that he learned the word aphelion, right? Exactly. See, you learned you learned a science term from reading an Asimov story. Of course you did, right? Science education being one of the things that he did. So yeah, it's kind of fun how he worked that in. Okay, good, right. Kate points out and this is, Kate, this is exactly the kind of thing that we need to start with, right? We learn that this is not Earth, and it doesn't seem to be, we don't know whether it's a colony of Earth or not. Kate, that's a really good point, right? It seems conceivable that it could be, just again from the beginning here. And the thing, Kate, more than anything else that leads me to suspect that is the Greek letters, right? So wait, so they had the Greek alphabet on this planet, on Lagash? I don't know exactly how I'm meant to pronounce that, but anyway, it's Neil points out that Lagash is an ancient city located northwest of the junction of the Euphrates and Tigris rivers. So he's sort of rooted that to an archaeological past, which is really interesting, of course, Neil, in context, right? Yeah, Tony Mead points out that it's sort of a lost city. Good. More. Dime says that Lagash makes me think of orcs. Dime, it would have made you think even more of orcs if I had mentioned, as Neil said, that the Lagash was located just to the east of Uruk, but it's just a coincidence, I'm sure. Okay, good. James, the world is coming to an end. And James, I would add, not only do we learn that the world is coming to an end, which is a sufficiently alarming thing to learn at the beginning of the story, right? But it also, I find the tone of it, both the tone of it and the source of that information fascinating, right? We've already established that Aton, who is speaking there at the end of this passage, is a scientist, right? He's the head of the observatory. And the thing that he pronounces seems strange, right? In just under 4 hours, civilization as we know it comes to an end. It will do so because, as you see, Beta is the only sun in the sky. Now, that seems deliberately cryptic, right? But not. I want to try to be careful with the word scientific. I am tempted to. I know I'm going to experience the temptation to overuse that word over the course of the night tonight, and I don't want to do that. But this is not very clinical speech, right? It's sensational speech. Civilization as we know it comes to an end in under 4 hours, followed then by a cryptic explanation, because Beta is the only sun in the sky. So guess what that has to do with it, right? That doesn't answer it's an explanation that doesn't really explain. And now it's clear that Aton doesn't really want to explain to the newspaper guy that he's talking to, right? So it's not, it's not inexplicable that he's being cryptic like this, but it is to me kind of interesting that the first thing that we hear is the chief scientist making a sensational declaration. In fact, the declaration that he makes is think about it, that line, in just under 4 hours, civilization as we know it comes to an end. What does that sound like? Well, to me, that sounds like the lead to a newspaper story, right? A particularly sensational newspaper story. And maybe he's actually teasing him, right? Maybe he's actually goading his opponent right there by deliberately imitating his style, right? Print that, he says. Right, so here I'll give you your lead. Right, now go run with this. Yeah. So okay. Anyway, so but again, it still to me kind of puts it on a kind of an interesting footing. Yeah, Michael, he is playing to his audience because we do know that Theramon is a newspaper man, but it's that kind of crossing of boundaries, which, again, sort of in retrospect, from the point of view of the rest of the story, seems to me kind of interesting. Lynn is asking, cryptic to the journalist or to us as readers? Well, it's both, right? He seems seeming to be pointedly cryptic. He seems to be wanting to annoy the newspaper man, but of course the result is that he's also being cryptic to us, right? Yeah, good. There was another thing I was going to say about Aton and... Never mind. Can't think of it. All right. Never mind. Move on. Okay, so All right, so we have this prophecy of doom coming from what seems to be a somewhat unlikely quarter. We quickly have Asimov quickly establishes what I think of as sort of the three different sort of what's the metaphor? I'm tempted to say three different poles, but of course magnets only have two poles, so that doesn't really work. Um, the three different centers, the three different sort of centers of gravity. Yeah, let's think of it as a system of three massive gravitational bodies. That's a better metaphor. There are three centers of mass, right, in this story that are kind of pulling at each other in different ways. And we see them. We get introduced to them by Theramon here. My columns may have been a little rough, but I gave you people the benefit of the doubt every time. After all, this is not the century to preach the end of the world is at hand to Lagash. You have to understand that people don't believe in the Book of Revelations anymore, and it annoys them to have scientists turn about face and tell us that cultists were right after all. No such thing, young man, interrupted Aton. While a great deal of our data has been supplied to us by the cult, our results contain none of the cult's mysticism. Facts are facts, and the cult's so-called mythology has certain facts behind it. We've exposed them and ripped away their mystery. I assure you that the cult hates us now worse than you do. I don't hate you. I'm just trying to tell you that the public is in an ugly humor. They're angry. So, three centers of gravity pulling at each other in this civilization, at least certainly in the context of this story. The scientists, right, of whom the astronomers and these particular astronomers at this observatory, and really sort of Aton personally, to a large extent, are the representatives, right? They are the spokespeople. They're the spokespeople in this for science, right, and scientists and the scientific perspective in this story. And then, who else? What are the other two centers? Yes, Veronica, exactly. The cult, and the public, right? Johnny Public, as Theramon calls him. Yeah. So you've got the public, and oh yeah, I did put on the title on my slide. I sometimes lose sight of the titles I put on my own slides, Gerald, and I'm like, wow, yeah, that's really cool. Anyway, so yeah, right, exactly. So those are the three things that we see being sort of balanced here. Now, Sharon, I had the first response. I was, needless to say, listening to the Escape Pod audio version of this story, which is very well done. And when I heard this passage, this is the first reference to the Book of Revelations. And my first response, Sharon, was I thought, because I still didn't know whether this was connected with Earth at all. So I thought this might be a reference to the Christian Bible and the Book of Revelation. And my first response was like, did he screw up the title of the Book of Revelation? Because so many people do that, right? Give it the plural, right? Call it Revelations, when the name of the book is the Revelation singular. There's only one Revelation. It's anyway. But so I was like, is this a reference to the Bible? And if so, did Asimov just mess that up? Right? What's going on there? But anyway, that's no. It seems not to be a reference to that, right? Though I think that one can't help but think of that, right? The connection seems to me rather inescapable, especially in the apocalyptic context that we're immediately put into in the beginning of this story, right? But okay, all right. So we have the cult, the public, and the scientists, right? What are the terms? How do we delineate these? What are sort of the, what do we learn about the ground that they occupy? If you see what I mean, right? What's at stake for these three? Jeff, I agree. At the very least, referencing the Book of Revelations, though it does not, in fact, turn out to be the Book of Revelation from the Bible, certainly reinforces the apocalyptic sense of the story. Absolutely. Like, in case we were thinking they were joking or not taking that seriously, we get this this very serious thing. Okay. What do we see? What do we see here? Close reading I want. Not general knowledge about the story. Close reading here. What do we learn here? As always, and this is a game I really like to play. You might not like to play this game as much as I do, but I really like to play this game. That is the game of putting myself in the moment of this story. Or to say the same thing a different way. Seeing the artistry of how the story is being unfolded, right? Not just looking at it as if the whole thing were an organic whole, kind of backing up and discussing the entire story all at once. But in this moment, right, which is still quite early on in the story, we know very little. This is the very first reference to the cult and the cultists, right? Certainly the most we've ever learned about them. And this is the first time we've had this sense of this divide, right? So in this moment, which is that first moment we're learning about it, what do we learn? Right? Okay, good. Jeff Hanvey says there's an idea here that mythology might have some germ of truth and should not be dismissed as mere fiction. Okay, good. So you're right. Although the beliefs of the cult are spoken of, it seems that if Theramon, who seems to be the representative of the public, right? Aton is the representative of the scientists, and Theramon seems to be the representative of the public. Neither one of them have anything good to say about the cult, right? They speak very slightingly of it. You can see the tone in Aton's voice, right? Even look at the verbs he uses. We've exposed them and ripped away their mystery. Very violent language, right? He definitely sort of places himself by saying that in an antagonistic relationship with the cult, right? He is, in some sense, ideologically opposed to the cult and their so-called mythology. Do you notice that too, right? Although he admits that they have certain facts behind them, right? Behind their mythology, he clearly feels that those facts have been either concealed or hampered or confused by this other nonsense, what he calls mysticism, in what I can only take to be a dismissive way, right? What do we now? We don't learn anything. The cult doesn't have a spokesperson yet, right? But what do we learn about the public? Good. Gerald was just making an observation about that. Interesting, yeah. Lynn says the cult's data is useful, but not the cult. Yes, exactly. That certainly seems to be Aton's perspective. But Gerald was just saying the public is in an ugly humor. It seems that the public in general is caught between the scientists and the cult. Perhaps they hold themselves outside of both, right? That's a little bit more. I mean, I agree. There's that separation, right? But I don't necessarily. I mean, maybe there is a sense in which the public is kind of looking back and forth from one to the other of them, right? But that the reference to the anger of the public here, right, suggests that they're kind of looking at both, right, and kind of judging both. And it seems, good Arthur, you're right. Aton is angry as well, right? There's a lot of anger in all three groups in this story, right? But it would seem, now tell me if you think this is right. The impression that I get here is that the status of the respect that the public has for the scientists is higher than the respect that they have for the cult, right? Because what they seem to be angry about, I mean, the beginning of the passage, right? This is not the century to preach the end of the world is at hand to Lagash. You have to understand that people don't believe the book of Revelations anymore. And it annoys them to have scientists turn about face and tell us the cultists are right after all. So where is the public? The public is actually in motion, right? It has turned. It used to be, the implication, the anymore there suggests the public used to believe in the book of Revelations, right? The public was generally, if they weren't cultists, they were pro-cult, right? But the public has been shifting away from the cult and abandoning the old beliefs in the book of Revelations, right? And science, it would seem, is the thing that has been what they have been turning to instead of the Book of Revelations, right? Um, and now, so that's what they're angry about. What they're angry about is that they're not angry that the scientists are opposing or ripping the mystery away from the cult. That seems, notice that stuff, that violent language that Aton so angrily uses, is in self-justification. No, 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 right? No, we are not pro-cult. You're misunderstanding, right? That's like how he defends himself. So we can see that in a sense they still really agree about the status of the cult and the cult beliefs. So okay, but the public feels betrayed. Arthur, yes, exactly. I think that's precisely the word. Several of you are making references here to the current presidential election. I'm not going to repeat any of those jokes, mostly because in making them, you're undermining my continuing attempt to pretend it's not happening. So stop it. Please don't make me think about the presidential election. Don't make me go there. I'm gonna end up like, knocking things over and setting my house on fire pretty soon. So okay. Anyway, exactly. Yeah, Wesley. Yes. The long night has come. Anyway, yes. No, I'm afraid of the dark. So let's not go there. All right. One more. Okay, not one more. As you might guess, I actually have more slides than this. Okay. Talking about the hideout. I see. They're supposed to hide where the darkness and the stars can't get at them, and then hold out when the rest of the world goes poof. If they can. It won't be easy. With all of mankind insane, with the great cities going up in flames, environment will not be conducive to survival. But they have food, water, shelter, and weapons. They've got more, said Aton. They've got all our records, except for what we will collect today. Those records will mean everything to the next cycle, and that's what must survive. The rest can go hang. Aton can be a really charming guy. So, okay, so what's the prophecy about, right? What do we learn here? What do we learn here about about their beliefs, about their understandings, about what do we get? What do we get here? Yeah. Interesting. Carrie is sort of expanding. I think she was typing this before I moved on to the next. This is about the previous slide, expanding about the sense of betrayal that the public feels. What would the public think if all religions and all science agreed on anything, right? Yeah, exactly. It's very unnerving to them. So good. The references to the cycle, the next cycle, right? Everything has happened before and will happen again. There's that sense of inevitability, right? And we also, Kate, you're right. We can see what the issue is here, right? What's at stake? How is the world going to be destroyed? It's not, as Kate Neville says, it's not physical destruction. It's psychological destruction, right? Yeah. And there's that desire to not to survive. I mean, for some of them to survive. No one's trying to save society. They believe, the scientists are convinced that the world is in fact going to end, right? It's not melodrama, it's not hyperbole, it's cold hard fact, right? And inescapable. They can't do anything about it. But they are wanting to try to survive and trying to do good for the next cycle, right? So that the people after the apocalypse will understand and maybe be able to do something, right? Okay, that's a really interesting. Yeah, both Todd Heidenreich and Brandon Minnick are saying it's a lot like the concept of foundation, actually, the foundation books by Asimov. Yeah, there's some similarities, definitely. Um, yes, yes. Arthur says, "What weather they have is not ours to control." Absolutely. Yep, yep, exactly. Okay, so that's but notice the specific things that are being predicted here, right? So just kind of expand on Kate's observation about the psychological destruction. So the destruction is that all mankind is going to go insane, which seems like a stranger prediction of doom, right? I mean, if they were saying like a comet's going to hit the planet or something like that, that would be one thing, right? But no, it's not going to be like that. All of mankind is going to go insane, and all of the cities are going to burn. That's what's going to happen. Now, notice what else we learn. Look at in that first paragraph. They're supposed to hide where the darkness and the stars can't get at them. What do we? Good. Yes, Wes, you were just typing this. Um, He says dark plus stars plus people equal insanity flames, apparently. I noticed that we don't know what darkness is or stars, and the problem posed seems to be that we don't know the people either. Yeah, exactly. There's something here that we don't understand. And what we get a glimpse of here, exactly as Wes points out, is that we're being shown what they don't understand, right? Obviously, they have no idea what stars are. They're using this word, interestingly, but they don't understand that. They don't know what the word means. Notice how he stumbles over the word. He can't recall the word for a minute, right? And even to say where the darkness can't get at them suggests at least a kind of ignorance of what is happening here, and then maybe a kind of mythologizing of it. It's certainly some kind of personification of darkness, right? To suggest that the darkness is going to attempt to get at them, right? Yes, good, Michael. It's at least Michael says they perceive the darkness and stars as physical beings. Physical beings that are going to come to their planet, right? Can't kick butt and take names. That's the worry, right? It's how the world's going to come to an end or something. Um, uh, maybe. It might just be a figure of speech. They might not literally believe that. It might just be a figure of speech. I'm not 100% sure. But yeah, good. Gerald says it sounds like a scientist's attempted reconstruction of what happens based on the cult's mythology. Excellent reminder, Gerald. We do know that lurking in the background and presumably pretty deep set in this society, based on what we were told about nobody believing in the Book of Revelations anymore. So people used to believe in it. So presumably there's a pretty broad base of familiarity with the concepts of the Book of Revelations in their culture, right? So is what we're seeing there the sort of the memory of those kinds of those terms, the sort of mythic significance that those things have in the Book of Revelations? Is that evidence of that surviving there? Possibly. So what's really happening, right? What's going on here, right? And how do we know what's going on? So we have three different pieces of evidence here, right? Another triad in this book, right? First, we have the evidence of archaeology. You realize, of course, that the history of civilization on Lagash displays a cyclic character. But I mean cyclic. I know, replied Theramon cautiously, that is the current... I know, replied Theramon cautiously, that is the current archaeological theory. Has it been accepted as a fact? Just about. In this last century, it's been generally agreed upon. This cyclic character is, or rather was, one of the great mysteries. We've located series of civilizations, 9 of them definitely, and indications of others as well, all of which have reached heights comparable to our own, and all of which, without exception, were destroyed by fire at the very height of their culture. And no one could tell why. All centers of culture were thoroughly gutted by fire, with nothing left behind to give a hint as to the cause. Okay. Lynn, great question. Lynn asks, what do we know about these creatures? Are we assuming they are like us human? I kind of have to, Lynn. I would also say I don't see any reason not to, but I can see some positive reasons too. Um, but Lynn, you're absolutely right not to take that for granted, of course, right? And we learn at the beginning that this is a different planet, plainly not our world. So why would we assume that these people are human? Um, well, but answer that question for me. Why could we assume that these are all humans? Joyce, the fact that Asimov almost always has only humans in his universe is not internal evidence, though strong external evidence. Um, Michael says because they're using human terms. Kurita says it never occurred to me that there would be alien newspapermen. Kurita, I know you're joking, but you're right. That is to say, from the beginning, the categories that we're being given are recognizable categories, right? Although we are told we're on a strange planet, under which is under very different conditions from ours, we also are given lots of reasons to classify these people into categories that we are familiar with, that are common to us, right? Um, they are good, April. They do appear anthropomorphic. We get no. There's never any item of description that suggests that they're anything but human. Um, we even have some specific details, April, that we can kind of build on, right, which suggest much more concretely human physiology and psychology, right? Yes, Gerald, the drink. Absolutely agree. That honestly, although it seems like a small thing, the alcohol is like would be my number one observation. If somebody asked me to prove that the people in this story were human, that's the first place that I would go, right? And that is that you're right, Dime. They don't have tentacles, but what's more, when they feel stressed out, they really want to drink, right? Their desire for alcohol is again sort of it seems I mean I won't say designed to that would be cryptic, but it certainly has the effect of establishing a connection between our experience and their experience, right? So I mean that whole incident of him saying that he really wants a drink and Aton saying no, I don't want you to tempt the men to get drunk tonight, and so he goes and then him having stashed that bottle of liquor somewhere, and Theramon wishing later on that he could have a drink. Good, Carrie. Even the really circumstantial evidence of the description of the room, the carpet, the windows, the soft chairs. Yes, it's very human. Even Carrie, I was really struck by Asimov's description of the sound that the curtains make when they're pulled closed and then opened up again. Right? It's all of those and every single detail that we get of those kind, every physical detail that we get, not just of what people look like, but of the things that they experience. It seems all designed to connect us to that story, that these are um, people who are very similar to us. But anyway, and I'm not saying any of these things prove it, but the establishment that the society that's established here is made to feel so familiar that I would need a heck of a lot of convincing to believe that these creatures weren't human. Good, Claudia, great observation. The color of the room is compared to dried blood, suggesting that, of course, their blood apparently is the same color as ours, unless, Claudia, of course, the color is actually a different color, but I don't think it's described as red, right? So it clearly is the color of our blood as well. Yeah. Veronica and Todd are both pointing out that, of course, in Star Trek and Star Wars, all the non-humans still go to the cantina and drink. I know they do, but still, do you see what I mean about the familiarity, the sense of familiarity there? Anyway, okay, more, not more on that. Back to what we were talking about before. What were we talking about before? The evidence of archaeology. What's the emphasis here? What do we learn exactly from the archaeology? What do we get about the end of the world? What new information do we get about the end of the world? the emphasis on the ending in fire. So that wasn't just a, you know, piece of like melodrama again, right? That seems to be we get confirmed that that's a concrete prediction, right? Um, Everything burns and they don't know why. And yes, Michael, it's happened many times, which is a little bit odd, right? I mean, it's, civilization as you know it ends today. Again, right? That the again part is a slightly unexpected thing, right? But notice the emphasis that this is Sheeran talking, right? Cyclic character, but I mean cyclic. How do you understand that line? When he says, but I mean cyclic. What 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 weight is he giving to the word cyclic there exactly? How do you understand that? Yes, Gerald, that's exactly what I think about that too. It seems to me as well to be about the regularity of the cycles, right? Not just that there have been many previous rises and falls, right? But he is emphasizing that it is actually cyclic. It goes around in a circle regularly, right? Um, yeah, good. Yes, it happens the same way every time. Good. And Lynn, the suggestion, of course, that it must come again. So this is a really powerful piece of evidence, right? Um, the the evidence of the archaeology doesn't prove that it's coming. It certainly doesn't prove that it's going to happen in a couple hours, but it's very suggestive that it's going to come, and it certainly gives weight to the rest of the observations that they make, right? Okay. The evidence of religion. There have been explanations of these current catastrophes, all of a more or less fantastic nature. Some say that there are periodic rains of fire, some that Lagash passes through a sun every so often, some even wilder things. But there is one theory, quite different from all these, that has been handed down over a period of centuries. I know, you mean this myth of the stars that the cultists have in their Book of Revelations. Exactly, rejoined Sheeran with satisfaction. The cultists said that every 2,050 years, Lagash entered a huge cave, so that all the suns disappeared, and there came total darkness all over the world. And then, they say, things called stars appeared, which robbed men of their souls and left them unreasoning brutes, so that they destroyed the civilization they themselves had built up. Of course, they mix all this up with a lot of religio-mystic notions, but that's the central idea. Okay. What do we learn here? Wes admires Sheeran coming back out of the hideout. Yeah, Wes, and I kind of admire how he makes light of it, right? Um, I mean, he could just be kind of up for an adventure and an interesting time, but the sort of the joking way in which, I mean, he was in the hideout, right? He was going to get to survive. He is totally convinced that everyone's going to go insane, right? But again, partially it seems out of his own kind of professional curiosity, he wants to see the event rather than just survive, than surviving it down in the hideout. But I agree, there is a uh, um, there is an element of heroism, I think, to that, and I particularly admired, at least what I took to be the implications of his kind of downplaying that. But yeah, good. Arthur suggesting that Sheeran is a cameo of Asimov. Maybe, but I'm very resistant to that kind of reading, Arthur. Resistant because I have no evidence to adduce. That is, I hate drawing conclusions that cannot be drawn from within the text itself, and I can't draw that conclusion from within the text itself. So I can't myself go there. More. Good. Tony says he got the impression that he has some doubt that this will actually happen. Maybe, or at least Tony. It seems to me more that he would rather see the confirmation of his theories than be in the hideout and not know what really happened. That the fulfillment of his curiosity in that way suggests that. But good. More observations here. Okay, let's see. going back and looking at the um, all right. Good, good. Oh, Steve, good question. So, Steve, just a procedural question. Your message has been submitted for moderation. All that means is I can see it now. That's it. That's it, right? So, like the moderation window is that's what I'm looking at. So that just means it went for our purposes. It means that it went through. Um, Now, James, great observation. It's interesting that the cultists had a number to attach. Why 2050? Why not round to 2000? Exactly, James. That's one of the things that seems to, it's one of the details that seems to really suggest that Aton was clearly correct, right? Aton was correct to um, perceive that there's something in what they were saying. It's not just nonsense, right? If it were just 2000, right, then it would sound like a guess, right? An exaggeration, something, right? 2050 is a weird number. Weird, especially because it's so close to such an appealing. I mean, 2000 is a lovely number, right? It's why everyone was paranoid when the year rolled over to 2000, in part, because it's like there's something that seems significant about that number in and of itself. And so there it is. It's like right in their grasp. But no, they insist on 2050, right, which is a much more prosaic number. Yeah, good, good. Um, so okay. Anyway, so good. What else? Let's see a couple other good observations here. Let's see. Yeah, Todd has some questions about the hideout. Why they thought they would survive without going insane. Yeah, I agree. Well, I'm not actually going to talk about the hideout all that much, Todd. But you're right. We probably should wait to talk about that for a little bit here. Um, yeah, yeah. But James, good. I agree. James Stevens also says the idea of the cave implies that they don't understand the start as being out in the universe, but in some enclosed space. Yeah. So the idea of then like the planet passes into a cave shows the mythological foundation of this teaching, right? And it's either obviously not literal, or it's based on very great um, ignorance of the way that things work, right? The way that the planet could possibly work. Good, James. What we do know is that caves are dark places that they're afraid to go, right? So that's what they have. And yeah, James, we're going to want to come back to that when we see references um, to caves later on. Well, one more. So we have the evidence of archaeology, of religion, and of physics. Suppose this body rotated about Lagash. So he's talking there's some non-luminous body, right? That's it. Remember how he was saying that their calculations of the universal law of gravitation um, almost totally worked, right? But there's this one little deviation that was throwing things off, right? One way in which it didn't fit observation. And so they theorized about the existence of this non-luminous body. Suppose this body rotated about Lagash at such a distance and in such an orbit, and had such a mass that its attention would exactly account for the deviations of Lagash's orbit from theory. Do you know what would happen? The columnist shook his head. Well, sometimes the body would get in the way of a sun, and Sheeran emptied what remained in the bottle at a draught. And it does, I suppose, said Theramon flatly. Yes, but only one sun lies in its plane of revolution. He jerked a thumb at the shrunken sun above, Beta, and it has been shown that the eclipse will occur only when the arrangement of the suns is such that Beta is alone in its hemisphere and at maximum distance, at which time the moon is invariably at minimum distance. The eclipse that results, with the moon 7 times the apparent diameter of Beta, covers all of Lagash and lasts well over half a day, so that no spot on the planet escapes the effects. That eclipse, comes once every 2,049 years. Theramon's face was drawn into an expressionless mask. Okay. Um, we have here the apparent, again, notice, coming back to the sort of accusation that Theramon was making at the beginning, right, of science doing this about face and supporting religion. Well, in one point, right, 2049 years, right? Um, yeah. Todd, I think I might be wrong about this. Again, I only read the story twice. But Lagash's moon, this other planet, this other orbiting thing is the thing that they call the moon, right? I don't think it has a normal moon. Um, does it have a regular moon as well as its six suns? I don't think it does. I think the only other non and I base that on two things. One, I think one of the references to the moon I believed was referring to this other planet, this other body that's going to come and do the eclipse. The other thing is that the uh, the fact that they had to theorize about a non-luminous body, right? Um, they had never perceived a non-luminous body in the sky, right? So this whole idea, hey, what if there's another body out there? But get this, it's non-luminous. It's a body, and it's not a sun, right? That this was a kind of a wild idea for that. James Stevens says that it's strange that they have a word for moon. Um, yeah, isn't it, James? And there are several things like that. You know what else is a strange word? Stars is a strange word too. Um, uh, Kate, my own theory, based on what I'm thinking about, coming back to what you were saying before, my own theory is that this was a colony of Earth eventually, but that they've forgotten that in the cyclical destruction of their society. Um, so that's my theory. Anyway, um, yeah, or that it's translated into English. Yeah, um, I don't think so, Michael. And the reason I don't think so, we don't get. This is not one of those stories that contains any kind of indication of how the story came to be in our hands, right? There's no textual frame for this story. I mean, it's almost there. Like it's like available to it. With the hideout and the survival of records. I mean, the idea of stories of this time surviving into the future and then, in some sense, coming down to us is um, I mean, it's there, right, kind of for the taking, but it's doesn't ever seem to be taken, right? And in fact, the details that we get, especially at the end, are things that clearly could not have made it into the hideout, right? So we're not given that. So, Michael, if we were given that, if we were given some kind of a textual explanation, then I would start thinking about translation into English from whatever language the story was originally written in. But I don't think we're there. Um, yeah, yeah, Wes. I also think that that kind of a frame would be an interesting place to start for a novelization. That would be really interesting. Um, okay, so the physicists have derived uh, a plausible theory that it based on or sort of suggested by things that they get from the cultists, right? What are the two things that they got from the cultists? What are the facts that they gleaned and then tried to rip away the mysticism? Darkness and 2005, 2050, right? Those are the two primary things that they seem to have gotten from it. The whole cave business, they dismissed the cave, right? But that sense of that the complete darkness, right? And from this, they derive this theory of the eclipse. Okay, let's take a brief break. Brief update. Wonderful work so far with the donations. Thanks everybody. Bunch of excellent donations. And yes, somebody was asking if you give multiple donations, will those all count? Yes, absolutely. We will add them up. And so I'd say so right now. The winning donation so far is at 510. So thanks for that. It was a very, very generous donation. Um, but that's where things stand. If you've donated before and want to try to beat that, you can donate again, and we'll add them up. It's all good. But wonderful. Thank you so much. I'm looking forward to doing the drawing at the end, and we'll see where we go. So wonderful. We've raised over $1,000 so far for Signum here tonight, and keeping the Mythgard Academy going. That's really wonderful. All right, so let's keep going. Let's think now. Why is how do we know what we know? Right. This is one of the things, for me, this is one of the most fun things about this story, right? What I loved about this story, for me, it was less about sort of the moment, being drawn into the moment, though I do find myself drawn into the moment at the end of the story, but less about that and more about this story. For me, was a really powerful subcreation. It created this world that really drew me imaginatively into it, and created this really neat thought experiment. Right? It's just a great what if story. So let's look at some of the things that we get. So the business about gravitation. But what do you know about gravitation? Nothing, except that it's a very recent development, not too well established, and that the math is so hard that only 12 men in Lagash are supposed to understand it. Tcha, nonsense. Baloney. I can give you all the essential math in a sentence. The law of universal gravitation states that there exists a cohesive force among all bodies of the universe, such that the amount of this force between any two given bodies is proportional to the product of their masses divided by the square of the distance between them. Is that all? That's enough. It took 400 years to develop it. Why that long? Sounded simple enough the way you said it. Because great laws are not divined by flashes of inspiration, whatever you may think. It usually takes the combined work of a world full of scientists over a period of centuries. After Genovi 41 discovered that Lagash rotated about the sun Alpha rather than vice versa, and that was 400 years ago, astronomers had been working. The complex motions of the 6 suns were recorded and analyzed and unwoven. Theory after theory was advanced and checked and counterchecked and modified and abandoned and revived and converted to something else. It was a devil of a job. The sentence in this passage that really resonates for me, why that long? Sounded simple enough, right? I mean, it seems a little bit odd at first, at first glance, that they seem to be making rather heavy weather of a fairly simple thing, right? I mean, gravitation is, kind of interesting, but it's doesn't seem to be quite as advanced as they would seem to be making it out at first, right? Why is it hard? What does this ask of us, right? What does this ask of us? Yeah, Brandon, that's exactly it. That and Neil, they have to work the suns and Lagash, right? This is one of those moments that really forces me imaginatively into the frame of this world that Asimov has created, right? Imagine trying to derive the law of gravitation in a solar system this complex, right? It's really complicated. Absolutely, Arthur. The science of physics evolved from astronomy and the observation of planetary motions, planetary and solar motion, right? And we had a really good idea of what those motions were a long time ago, hundreds of years ago, back in the Middle Ages. They were great at this. But they have a pretty major challenge with that, right? This is a way more complicated system. Just mapping the route of the sun. Mapping the route of the sun in our world is fairly complicated, right? Think, the sun moving through the signs of the zodiac and stuff. The fact that you have the rotational axis of the Earth and the revolutionary axis of the Earth, and they're not the same. So that you've got the tilt of the Earth. So you have the ecliptic, which is the apparent path that the sun travels around the Earth is at an angle, right? And that's why we get the seasons, and that's why the sun moves through the different signs of the zodiac and all that stuff. That's complicated enough, and we're talking about a 2-body problem, right? How about starting with a 7-body problem and then trying to work that out from there? So lest I were tempted to say, like, come on, gravitation, whatever, right? This really kind of forces us to sit down and say, okay, no, it's really not that simple at all, right? Now, yeah, Carrie Gross says the great laws and flashes of inspiration, a direct pshaw on Newton and the apple. Yes, exactly. It's not how things really work. Now, I love these moments. These are from near the end of the story, but I wanted to bring them in here because sort of thinking about this imaginative framework of the story. The wild theory that Binet suggests. Well then, supposing there were other suns in the universe. He broke off a little bashfully. I mean, suns that are so far away that they're too dim to see. It sounds as if I've been reading some of that fantastic fiction, I suppose. Not necessarily. Still, isn't that possibility eliminated by the fact that according to the law of gravitation, they would make themselves evident by their attractive forces? Not if they were far enough off, rejoined Binet. Really far off. Maybe as much as 4 light years or even more. We'd never be able to detect perturbations then because they'd be too small. Say that there were a lot of suns that far off, like a dozen or so maybe. Theramon whistled melodiously. What an idea for a good Sunday supplement article. 24 suns in a universe 8 light years across. Wow, that would shrink our world into insignificance. The readers would eat it up. Love this passage. Love this whole set of passages here. Good. Gerald Michael and Michael Cheskoski were just saying exactly what I was thinking when I was reading the story too. Why did they calculate in light years? How would they calculate in light years? I don't know the answer to that question, Gerald Michael. And Michael, Gerald and Michael. I don't know. That seemed to me a problem as well, because the concept of light year only comes in when you are already aware of astronomical distances so tremendous that you need a really, really, really big unit of measure in order to make the numbers meaningful, right? So yeah, I think it's, I don't know, it's interesting. Neil Ottenstein suggests that it's that perhaps that's more evidence for its being a colony. Perhaps, maybe. Yeah. No, I mean, I'm not saying that in theory you couldn't derive it. I mean, you could still calculate. You can probably still calculate the speed of light, right? And therefore, from the speed of light, come to a unit of distance named light year. I'm just saying, why? Why adopt that as a unit? It was only adopted as a unit when it was needed, and when they were looking for a unit that big, right? The unit that would seem more intuitive for Lagash would be the astronomical unit, right? That's, the astronomical unit is the distance between the Earth and the Sun, an AU. And you can measure things in AUs. Measuring the distance between us and other stars isn't so useful in AUs, right? That's a pretty big number too. A little smaller than meters, but still really big, right? So you do light years to do that. I would think that if they want a big unit, they would have adopted, the distance between themselves and alpha. But anyway, it's but the point is, let's not get too distracted by that one point. The point is the larger one here, right? This sounds to us hopelessly naive, right? But again, the naivete of this statement, the to us naivete of this statement is jarring to me, right? Again, it helps to jar me, and right at sort of the last second, right? This is the conversation that's going on right before things start happening, right? So the jar that it gives me is it jars me out of my assumptions, right? If you put yourself imaginatively into the mind of a person who lives on this world, you would never have seen, if there's suns in the sky all the time, you would never see the stars. You would have absolutely no reason. They cannot do observational astronomy of anything but the six suns because they can't see anything else. So, as far as they know, they have no reason to think there's anything outside their solar system, right? So this idea of what if there are other suns really, really far away, right? That's very remarkable, right? Yes, and Carrie says, Asimov is reminding us that we are immensely more insignificant. Yes, yes. What at first might make us feel a little smug and superior, right? Like, oh, we know all about that, right? When it comes around, right, is kind of a pointer to us, right? Hey, we know that the universe is larger than this, and we overlook this sense of insignificance, right? More. Okay. Have you ever thought what a simple problem gravitation would be if only you had a sufficiently simple system? Supposing you had a universe in which there was a planet with only one sun. The planet would travel in a perfect ellipse, and the exact nature of the gravitational force would be so evident that it could be accepted as an axiom. Astronomers on such a world would start off with gravitation, probably before they even invented the telescope. Naked eye observation would be enough. But would such a system be dynamically stable? Questioned Sheeran doubtfully. Sure, they call it the one-in-one case. It's been worked out mathematically, but it's the philosophical implications that interest me. It's nice to think about, admitted Sheeran, but it's as a pretty abstraction, like a perfect gas or absolute zero. Yeah, it couldn't happen, right? Obviously, it can't really happen. Sorry, that's the next one. Yeah, okay, so what's the effect of this? What impact does this have on us imaginatively as we're approaching the world? Interesting, Arthur. That's a really fascinating thing. Here, Arthur says Asimov seems to be defending science fiction here, in a sense. How dare anyone be so wacky as to postulate a world different from our own, right? Well, yeah, and of course, Arthur, as you will have noticed, this is the same guy, right? Binet, who was disclaiming. So you're going to think I was reading that fantastic fiction, right? Yeah, exactly. And yes, Joyce, he is demonstrating the level of civilization that they have, right? Again, lest we think that they are naive, this kind of makes us seem the naive ones, right? Like, oh, yeah, we have a really, really simple system. It's if we hear their description of gravity and think like, a bunch of morons, right? Finally stumbling to gravitation after so long. This is, we're reminded, right, that how easy we had it. How much less far than them we have come, despite the fact that we have so many advantages over them in this. So yeah, that's really cool. Good, yeah. Kate Neville says it seems that Asimov is reminding us how much our imagination is framed by the natural world. Yes, yet some are capable of imagining green suns. Yes, yes, exactly. Um, and of course, here's the guy in the science fiction story imagining our system, our world, as a fiction. Um, More now. Someone was asking a question here. Let's see, where was it? Um, yes, Matt Weller asks, how can they have developed science but not know how to make a bonfire that will outlast an eclipse? Great question. The rod was topped by 6 inches of wavering flame. Methodically, the other rods were lighted until 6 independent fires turned the rear of the room yellow. The light was dim, dimmer even than the tenuous sunlight. The flames reeled crazily, giving birth to drunken, swaying shadows. The torches smoked devilishly and smelled like a bad day in the kitchen, but they emitted yellow light. There was something about yellow light after 4 hours of somber, dimming beta. Even Latimer had lifted his eyes from his book and stared in wonder. Sheeran warmed his hands at the nearest, regardless of the soot that gathered upon them in a fine grey powder, and muttered ecstatically to himself, "Beautiful, beautiful. I never realized before what a wonderful color yellow is." But Theramon regarded the torches suspiciously. He wrinkled his nose at the rancid odor and said, "What are those things?" "Wood," said Sheeran shortly. "Oh, no, they're not. They aren't burning. The top inch is charred, and the flame just keeps shooting up out of nothing. That's the beauty of it. This is a really efficient artificial light mechanism." Really efficient. What do we see here? What do we learn from this passage? This is of all these 4 passages here, these kind of imaginative recalibration passages, I guess I would call them. This is my favorite one. Um, Candles are high tech. Exactly. Yeah. How is it, as Matt was asking before, how is it that they can have science but not have torches, right? Like candles. These are not exactly candles. We don't really know how they work, right? Um, but they're like candles, right? Yeah, exactly, Amy. They never need artificial light. More than any of these other 4 passages, this one really, really sort of shoves my imagination over the edge, right? Imagine a world in which it is always daylight. I mean, this story demands of us a serious imaginative leap, right? What would it be like to live on a planet where it was never dark, where there were 6 suns and always at least one sun in the sky, right? You think of how much of our civilization over the the centuries and the millennia, how much of our civilization has been focused on maintaining light in the darkness, right? On surviving the night, to make sure we have enough light to see, a light to operate when it gets dark, the fact that we have only the one source of light, so that it's not just that it's gets dark every night, for at least half the time, but that I mean, even on like a really cloudy day, it gets dark because we only got the one sun, right? Presumably on a cloudy day in Lagash, it's not nearly as dark as it is here on a cloudy day. Um, yeah, yeah. Um, this is fascinating. Now, good. James says it's almost strange that they have curtains in the lab. Why would they ever want to block out the light? Well, James, I think the point is they wouldn't normally. That is, sometimes you have curtains because sometimes you want there to be dimmer light, right? The only reason it gets completely dark or almost completely dark when they close the curtains is because of the alignment, right? Because it's only beta and beta is at its dimmest, right? So when beta is dim orange like this, then a curtain will make it on you closing it, but it's like nobody, unlike us, would close their curtains on a day like this, right? But when it's really bright, you can close the curtain. Presumably, you can close the curtains, and it's still light in the room. It's just less light, because you would want to moderate the light, but it would be all about moderating light, right? It wouldn't be about trying to preserve light, nobody would need to make light. Yeah, exactly, Tony. They would have lots of variety and amounts and quality of light. Yes, exactly. Todd Heidenreich says architecturally, all rooms in buildings must have windows. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Um, absolutely, absolutely. Yes, Carolyn Morehouse says their sleep patterns must be significantly different than ours. I was thinking a very similar thing too. That this does seem to be, um, uh, uh, there does seem to be a bunch of things that aren't explained, right? That are never really never truly explained. Um, and that's certainly one of them. We don't really know. We don't really know what their sleep patterns and things would be like. Um, but yeah, James, they don't seem to. You're right to say that they don't even seem to consider. They don't even seem to think of fire as a light source, right? It doesn't like that's not when we see that come up twice, right? Um, yeah, yeah. Um, Brandon actually took that the other way. That noticing how beautiful yellow is in isolation is interesting. He says it seems they typically don't deal with yellow light. I actually think they do. It's because they're missing the yellow light, and they take it for granted all the time. That it seems like most of their suns are yellow. You can tell this first by how they're commenting on the darkness, on the redness of Beta this day, right? This day is a real. Even if it weren't for like a world-ending eclipse, it would still be kind of a bummer of a day, right? Yeah, that's a sentence you don't utter very often, right? It was a bummer of a day even before the apocalypse. But actually, it sounds like a good first sentence for a novel, doesn't it? Um, but I'm waiting for somebody to quote Aamir, right? Or Theoden. Anyway, a sword day, a red day. Anyhow, so it's yeah. So yeah. I think yellow is the norm, and they're missing yellow. Right? Is how I took that. Um, so yeah, yeah. Um, okay. So more. So let's move on. Let's move on from this. And good. Let's. I want to go back to the darkness now. Um, okay. Why is the darkness such a big deal? This is another thing now. This is the central imaginative leap that we as readers have to make in this story, right? And all of these others are really kind of preparing us for this one. The central thing, I would argue, that Asimov is inviting us to picture is what would it be like to be on to live in a world like this where it was never dark, and how would we respond to the darkness? Um, so let's look at what we at what he says here. This is Theramon, of course, talking to Sheeran. What is there in darkness to drive me mad? Sheeran smiled to himself as he spun the empty liquor bottle with abstracted motions of his hand. Have you ever experienced darkness, young man? The newsman leaned against the wall and considered. No, can't say I have, but I know what it is. Just, he made vague motions with his fingers and then brightened. Just no light, like in caves. Have you ever been in a cave? In a cave? Of course not. I thought not. I tried last week, just to see, but I got out in a hurry. I went in until the mouth of the cave was just visible as a blur of light with black everything else, with black everywhere else. I never thought a person my weight could run that fast. What do we see here? What do we learn? Uh, have you ever experienced darkness? Um, yeah. Um, Todd, back to your point about architecture. We can see darkness isn't even a thing indoors. It's not just that they've never seen it get dark outside. He's never experienced darkness, right? Um, And yes, that's the thing that we have to orient ourselves to. This society, growing up as it has on a world without night, is a society that completely embraces light, that believes light to be essential to live. We take for granted darkness. You know, I have a room in my basement that I sometimes sleep in, like when I'm up until 2 o'clock in the morning and don't want to wake up my family when I go to bed. And it is pitch dark. There's not a single ray of light in there because it's a subterranean room. No starlight, nothing, right? And I love it. I love being in the dark, right? It's great. It's great. It's in the basement too, so it's freezing cold, especially in the New Hampshire winters. I love freezing cold, darkness. My favorite place to sleep, right? So there I am, pitch darkness, freezing cold. But see, notice I like this. Why do I embrace this? Because I associate that with sleep, right? I associate that with peace, and so now I can't be distracted by these other things, right? Especially when I'm sleeping until like 11 o'clock in the morning when it's light outside, but it's still dark, right? In that room, because I associate night with sleep, even though I'm a night owl and stay up half the night. Nevertheless, I associate night with sleep, right? Therefore, we always have, in our society, we have rooms that are not as bright, right? We have mechanisms by which we can bring darkness into a room where it would not normally be, right? It's a thing that we do. Not just reduction of the light like there are curtains, but actual darkness, right? Exactly, Tony. We like the dark. Dark for dark business. Exactly. So, yeah. They don't do that. Apparently, their architecture is such that they do not have interior rooms, right? We can imagine how that architecture would work, right? Whether it's, sort of like rectangular things with courtyards in the middle or whatever, but they take for granted, they have this assumption of daylight everywhere, right? That's how you live. Yeah. But if you've never experienced darkness, what do we see about the significance of caves here? Yeah, Michael, no one goes in caves, right? Caves seem to be almost like archetypal, right? Places of fear. Have you ever been in a cave, right? And his response is, of course not, right? I mean, you crazy? Karita says, so no mining on this society. Well, not like that, right? Yeah, caves are clearly, Tina, definitely terrifying, right? Remember, it's the cave that the Book of Revelations reaches for as an explanation for the darkness that surrounds the planet, right? Yeah, no submarines, Todd. Submarines are right out. Yeah, absolutely. Exactly, Carolyn. They can have open pit mines. That's presumably what they would have to have. Okay, good. More. There's a fascination in being frightened when it's part of a game. A baby is born with 3 instinctive fears: of loud noises, of falling, and of the absence of light. That's why it's considered so funny to jump at someone and shout boo. That's why it's such fun to ride a roller coaster. And that's why the Tunnel of Mystery started cleaning up. People came out of that darkness shaking, breathless, half dead with fear, but they kept on paying to get in. Remember, the Tunnel of Mystery is this, was it a mile? About a mile-ish, right? A tunnel, right? Which was just dark inside, right? It was the thrill ride. People just ride on a slow cart through this tunnel of darkness. Wait a while, I remember now. Some people came out dead, didn't they? There were rumors about that of that after it shut down. The psychologist snorted. Bah, 2 or 3 died. That was nothing. They paid off the families of the dead ones and argued the Jungler City Council into forgetting it. After all, they said, if people with weak hearts want to go through the tunnel, it was at their own risk. And besides, it wouldn't happen again. So they put a doctor in the front office and had every customer go through a physical examination before getting into the car. They actually boosted ticket sales. It was a mile, yeah. 15 minutes of dark, exactly. Yeah, Ed says apparently no closets on this planet. That is interesting, Ed, because they do. Right? Remember, they have a dark closet in which Sheeran is threatening to lock the cultist. Right? That was one of the things that I was a little puzzled by. It's like, wait, okay, so they have a room with no window, right? Is it like a cave? Right? That is to say, because I mean, you'd think if there's if people have closets and therefore rooms in every house where there's darkness, you'd have to have artificial lights, wouldn't you? And but maybe they're just like caves, like nobody would ever go into them, or they don't go in the closet and close the door. Yeah. Now, Michael Cheskovsky points out their building materials or design might not be completely opaque. They might have sunroofs or something. Yes, that's possible. Tina, they might not have walk-in closets. Exactly. Quite possibly. I could easily see that, Michael, having their houses have at least translucent ceilings, right? That I could buy that, right? We're not explained; it's all speculation, right? We don't really know, but I would think that's possible. More. What do you notice here? What else? Yeah, Carolyn, they do have this concept of paying and going to be frightened, right? Like at a horror movie or a thrill ride. Again, another one of those instances, Carolyn, that I would point to as this sort of indication that their culture is very similar to ours, right? That they are like us psychologically. Yeah. Good. What else? What else strikes you? What else jumps out at you about this passage? I was really interested in the 3 instinctive fears, right? I mean, striking because it's like what we know, right? Loud noises, falling, right? I don't know if we have an instinctive fear of loud noises, but I mean, we do. The startle reflex, right, is presumably what he's referring to, and of falling, right, and of the absence of light. Now, Michael, you're right. We are also afraid of the dark. Fear of the dark is definitely a thing, right, in our society, but it's not quite the same as fear of falling, right? Babies on Earth don't fear the darkness. Infants, I mean. A babe in arms is not afraid of the dark. They don't like being left alone. They don't like being left alone in the brilliant sunlight either, right? Exactly, Matt. Here we say that people are only born with 2 instinctive fears. So he's taken the 2 instinctive fears that we have, fear of falling, startling at loud noises, and added the 3rd, the fear of darkness, right? And that's so like humans, right? These people are just like us, but transplanted in this different environment. And we have to, again, this prompts us to imagine what would really be the impact if nobody in thousands of years, other than on freak occasions, right, had experienced darkness. What would that do? How would we change as a species, right? How might that impact us? So going back to the question I started this little section with, right? So what? What's the big deal, right? Why is Why is the darkness such a problem? It might not be a problem for us, but if we're only thinking of it as we experience it, then we're missing the point, right? Then we're failing to undertake the imaginative leap that we're being invited to make. So yeah, Tony, they've obviously been there long enough to evolve this difference from us. Yeah, there's and how long have they been there? Minimum? What is the minimum amount of time that these people have been here on this planet? Minimum. Yeah, close, James. 18,000. 18,450, right? Um, yeah, exactly. Um, yeah, got it. 18,450, right? Exactly. So that's a while, right? It's a goodly time. One could imagine this kind of a thing changing, right? Um, yeah, yeah. Good, Michael says, if we try to think of a parallel for ourselves, we can't because we can't even conceive of it. Exactly, exactly. And um, that's exactly the issue, right? Um, Imagine darkness everywhere, no light as far as you can see. The houses, the trees, the fields, the earth, the sky, black. And stars thrown in for all I know, whatever they are. Can you conceive it? Yes, I can, declared Theramon truculently. By the way, truculent is one of my favorite words. And Sheeran slammed his fist down on the table in sudden passion. You lie! You can't conceive that! Your brain wasn't built for the conception any more than it was built for the conception of infinity or of eternity. You can only talk about it. A fraction of the reality upsets you, and when the real thing comes, your brain is going to be presented with the phenomenon outside its limits of comprehension. You will go mad, completely and permanently. There is no question of it. He added sadly, and another couple of millennia of painful struggle comes to nothing. Tomorrow there won't be a city standing unharmed in all Lagash. Exactly, Michael, as you were saying, we have a hard time conceiving of this, right? You try to, and again, I love the way in which this story not only acknowledges but embraces the impossibility of really, we can try, sorry, it's bothering me. We can try to project ourselves into this kind of a world, right? We can try to make that imaginative leap, but when we do, um, we're just talking about it, right? We can't really conceive of it. Um, but it's interesting to try. It's interesting to think about. But again, even the acknowledgement, and I love the comparison, right? The parallels that he makes. He says to Theramon that he cannot conceive of universal darkness any more than he can think of what? Infinity, right? Or eternity, right? You can say infinity. You can pose the concept, but you can't. Your mind can't really grasp infinity. Um, exactly, exactly. Um, good, yeah. Arthur points out how all of a sudden Sheeran drops his joviality and embraces pessimism. And yes, he does seem to be suggesting that it is darkness inescapable that is coming towards them. Absolutely. We approve of obscure Tolkien references here. Yeah, good. And Lynn, I love the reminder here that they don't understand. They don't understand stars, whatever they are. Yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, Tony says, I know some people get really uncomfortable thinking about the concept of eternity. Yes, both infinity and eternity are really kind of freaky if you actually really try to think of them, right? It's hard. People normally don't, right? People talk about, even people who use the word eternity, right? Um, people who might think or talk about eternal life and things like that. I mean, you find normally what people seem to be imagining I know for a fact what I used to primarily imagine when I talked about eternal life was perpetual life, right? That is just things going on and on and on and just not stopping, right? That was the closest I could come to the concept of it, but that's not what eternity means, right? To be outside of time and embracing all of time, to be removed from the time stream entirely. I can't understand that. I can't picture that. It's not. It's just not possible, right? Um, yeah, yeah. Um, one more. Those people of the tunnel, those people of the tunnel, that is the people who went through the tunnel and went crazy, right? And wouldn't refuse to go inside ever again. Those people of the tunnel consisted of those unfortunates whose mentality did not quite possess the resiliency to overcome the claustrophobia that overtook them in the darkness. 15 minutes without light is a long time. You only had 2 or 3 minutes, and I believe you were fairly upset. The people of the tunnel had what is called a claustrophobic fixation. Their latent fear of darkness in enclosed places had crystallized and become active, and, as far as we can tell, permanent. That's what 15 minutes in the dark will do. Okay, so the link between darkness and the fear of the darkness and claustrophobia, right, explained by Sheeran the psychologist. So being enclosed is a thing that they have a fear of as well, right? And that again, I go back to the image of the cave, right? The sort of a cave is the perfect um, perfect vehicle, the perfect imaginative vehicle of this fear of the darkness. Um, the cave has both things, right? Both the darkness and the um, enclosure. Yeah, yeah. Um, Yes, Carrie, I was thinking exactly the same thing, which is ironic considering that they've put a limit of 8 light years on the size of the universe. No, that's a wild flight of fancy, an 8 light year universe, right? Everyone would find that insane. They think the universe is much, much smaller. So, yes, I too think it's really fascinating that these people who are afraid of closed spaces imagine that the universe is really, really small, right? That's I love that. I find that really, really cool. um yeah, good. um yeah, April says true darkness is more than just an absence of light. It's a serious type of sensory deprivation. You can't tell your position. You can't tell what the spatial configuration is. You can't see. Yeah, and remember that's exactly what Theramon was saying when he pulled the curtains, right? I can't see, right? Yeah, yeah. Um, exactly. Um, well, let's go back to the cultists. This is Aton arguing with the cultist who breaks in. I offered to present scientific backing for your beliefs, and I did. The cultist's eyes narrowed bitterly. Yes, you did, with a fox's subtlety. For your pretended explanation backed our beliefs, and at the same time removed all necessity for them. You made of the darkness and of the stars a natural phenomenon, and removed all its real significance. That was blasphemy. If so, the fault isn't mine. The facts exist. What can I do but state them? Your facts are a fraud and a delusion. Aton stamped angrily. How do you know? And the answer came with the certainty of absolute faith. I know. What do we see? Yeah, Carrie, exactly. The scientific proof of a cult's beliefs destroys the cult's beliefs, right? Sort of, right? Not the facts. Aton, now remember, Aton, I think, is being a little bit disingenuous here, right? He's sort of claiming, he's sort of speaking as if people as if he were like supporting the cult, when we know from not only what he said but how he said it earlier on that he's quite anti-cult, right? And was remember expose, rip away, right? Those verbs that he was using about their beliefs before. So he's certainly not wanting to really support the cult's beliefs, and yet he's here defending himself. But I want to make sure we don't miss the cultist's point. What's been lost? What has Aton missed? And I think we have to be careful here. I don't think it's that. Jeff, a couple of people are saying this, so I'll take Jeff's comment. Jeff says that faith and facts are mutually exclusive. One cannot exist in the presence of the other. That's true in a sense, right? That if you believe that something is, if you actually see it and experience it, then it's no longer faith, it's knowledge, it's experience, right? It's like the New Testament says that about faith. It's part of the New Testament definition of faith. Paul talks about that, the Apostle Paul. So yeah, I see what you mean there, but that I don't think is that's not what the cultist says, right? Notice his emphasis, the cultist's emphasis. You made of the darkness and of the stars a natural phenomenon and removed all its real significance. Your facts are a fraud and a delusion. Right? Yes, Amy, that's exactly, I think, what where the cultist is going here. Amy says, Aton is removing the mythology, the stories, the imaginative elements, the mystery, all of which are just as important to humanity as facts and science. Yes, exactly. Aton is acting as if what he has done and said has just simply, like, hey, I confirmed that you were right. Aren't you content with that? No, the facts. The cultist speaks with disdain for facts, even the facts which support his belief, right? Instead of grasping at that, instead of being delighted about that, they're offended at that. Not because I do not believe that what Asimov is indulging in here is an oversimplification of the faith and fact divide at all. I think it's more like what Amy said. Yes, there is the fact. We know that the world is going to go dark every 2050 years, right? The book of Revelation says so. This is what the cultists would say, right? The book of yes, okay. So you have a scientific theory that shows that that's going to happen. We didn't need that. We already knew that, right? The book of Revelation says it. What is the real effect? Well, remember exposing and ripping away, right? What Aton is doing in his science by deriving these facts scientifically is not supporting it, but undermining it. Not undermining it because he shows that, but undermining it because he's saying that's all that there is, right? By suggesting there is nothing mystical. There is nothing spiritual. There is nothing supernatural about the darkness. You've removed all of its real significance. While proving the fact itself, you have completely missed the point. And he's deluded others, right? Exactly, Lynn. Lynn says, I don't think the cultist rejects the facts, but the assertion that facts are enough. Exactly. That's why the facts are a fraud and a delusion. A fraud to say that they've explained what's going to happen, right? If he's standing up and saying, I know what's going to happen and I can tell you what's going to happen, and there's going to be an eclipse, it's going to get dark, and you'll see something which is called stars, right? Those are facts. The cultists agree with those facts, but to say that that's what's going to happen is a fraud, right? And if you believe it, you are deluded, and you're trying to delude other people, right? There is more to it. Okay, what is the more? Let's try to understand the cultist's beliefs here. He grinned at Sheeran again. He grinned at the cultist. Come now, you don't really think I'm trying anything as crude as slow starvation? My dear Latimer, if I lock you in the closet, you are not going to see darkness, and you are not going to see the stars. It does not take much knowledge of the fundamental creed of the cult to realize that for you to be hidden from the stars when they appear means the loss of your immortal soul. Now I believe you to be an honorable man. I'll accept your word of honor to make no further effort to disrupt proceedings, if you'll offer it. A vein throbbed in Latimer's temple, and he seemed to shrink within himself as he said thickly, "You have it." And then he added with swift fury, "But it is my consolation that you will all be damned for your deeds of today." He turned on his heel and stalked to the high three-legged stool by the door. So the stars are the key, right? When the darkness comes, the stars will come. And if you are hidden from the stars, it will mean the loss of your immortal soul. So the stars bring salvation, I guess? Or I don't know. I mean, I'm not pretending I fully understand the theology of the cult here. Is it a purification thing, Arthur? Possibly, possibly. April was thinking of the stars as a trial, right? Like a trial of faith. Possibly, possibly. I don't think. I mean, could they be thinking that souls go to the stars? Well, we'll do the quotation from Revelation, the book of Revelations next. But yeah. So maybe, but notice on the stars. Stars were the weak point of the scientific theory. That is, Aton can explain everything in the book of Revelations except stars, right? He has no explanation for stars. Binet, with his wild, crazy, just absolutely out there imaginations of an 8-light-year universe with, like 24 suns, really, 4 light years away. If he's the only one who has anything vaguely like, what we know the stars actually to be, right? So the stars are the one fact that the science doesn't account for, and the stars seem to be the central point. And this, I think, helps us to understand another way in which Latimer thinks they're completely missing the point, right? Just because you think you understand scientifically the mechanism by which this happens, don't think you understand the significance, right? The stars are coming, and the stars will what? Purify the world. What will they do? Let's see. Let's read the book. Or rather, listen to the recitation of the book. And in the city of Trigon at high noon, Vendret too came forth and said unto the men of Trigon, Lo, ye sinners, though ye scorn the ways of righteousness, yet will the time of reckoning come. Even now the cave approaches to swallow Lagash, yea, and all it contains. And even as he spoke, the lip of the cave of darkness passed the edge of Beta, so that to all Lagash it was hidden from sight. Loud were the cries of men as it vanished, and great the fear of soul that fell upon them. It came to pass that the darkness of the cave fell upon Lagash, and there was no light on all the surface of Lagash. Men were even as blinded, nor could one man see his neighbor, though he felt his breath upon his face. And in this blackness there appeared the stars, in countless numbers, and to the strains of music of such beauty that the very leaves of the trees cried out in wonder. And in that moment the souls of men departed from them, and their abandoned bodies became even as beasts, yea, even as brutes of the wild, so that through the blackened streets of the cities of Lagash they prowled with wild cries. From the stars there then reached down the heavenly flame, and where it touched, the cities of Lagash flamed to utter destruction, so that of man and of the works of man naught remained. Yeah, this Joyce, I agree that it does sound very King James, doesn't it? Yeah, definitely. Um, James says it does sound like there could be fire from the sky. Their stories include fire from the sky. The fire which comes to destroy the civilizations is inflicted by the stars, right? It's a heavenly flame that descends. It's a judgment upon mankind, right? The heavenly flame. Yeah, Carolyn, it does sound like a kind of rapture with only the souls going off and not the bodies. Yes, the souls are being taken up. Um, so, okay, let's read that again. We get the music, right? And then the souls of men departed from them, and their abandoned bodies became even as beasts, right? Um, is that salvation, right? This moment the souls have been departed from. Now you're right. You're right. Very good point, Arthur. Arthur doesn't say that they're taken up, just that they depart. Good. Are they driven out? The souls, right? In that moment, the souls of men departed from them. Their bodies don't die, right? They remain alive, but without soul, right? Witless, as it were. Um, from the words of Sheeran, which do seem to be accepted by Latimer, the idea about being damned if you're hidden from the stars when the stars descend suggests that souls departing from bodies is, at least in case of faithful cult members, a good thing, right? Um, yeah. So, where did these stories come from? How did the scientists explain the book of Revelations? Because that's the next obvious question, right? If they found that, in fact, this account, and once we, when we finally hear this quotation from the book of Revelations, it's quite, plain how accurate, how close to fact it actually is. If we accept, the scientific explanation of fact, right, that Sheeran and Aton have been giving, this is very close to fact, right? So, um, how do they how how do they get them? Their facts, right? Where do their facts come from? This is Sheeran's explanation of how the Book of Revelations must have come about, because there are a couple subsets of people who would survive, right? Um, there are children below 6 to whom the world as a whole was too new and strange for them to be too frightened at stars and darkness. They would be just another item in an already surprising world. You see that, don't you? The other nodded doubtfully. I suppose so. Lastly, there are those whose minds are too coarsely grained to be entirely toppled. The very insensitive would be scarcely affected. Oh, such people as some of our older work-broken peasants. Well, the children would have fugitive memories, and that, combined with the confused, incoherent babblings of the half-mad morons, formed the basis for the Book of Revelations. Naturally, the book was based in the first place on the testimony of those least qualified to serve as historians, that is, children and morons, and was probably edited and re-edited through the cycles. Do you suppose, broke in Theramon, that they carried the book through the cycles the way we're planning on handing on the secret of gravitation? Yeah, Arthur, it's hard not to read this as a little dismissive. Agreed. A little bit dismissive, yes, I think so. Um, Good. Several of you, April and Arthur, are both saying, doesn't this contradict the idea of the three inborn fears, right? That a child of 6 would have the fear of darkness, right? Um, I don't think it's necessarily a contradiction. I don't think it forgets the inborn fear concept. It seems the idea that just that children of 6 would be more psychologically flexible, basically. It's not that they wouldn't be afraid. They'd notice that it was dark and they would be afraid of the dark, but it wouldn't overthrow their mind in the same way that it would overthrow the mind of an adult. That is, an adult who isn't a moron, apparently. Um, yeah, that seems possible. Um, by the way, I got a really interesting email um, right before class tonight from a student, Cecilia, um, uh, who is blind, and I was really interested to hear her comments on this story. As you can imagine, a person totally blind has a rather different imaginative experience reading Nightfall than others do, and she was saying that as the climax was approaching and the world was getting darker and darker, she just kept wanting to comfort the people. It's okay. You can get through this, which I thought was really cool. But of course, the what she points out to be what I do think to be a very serious gap in Asimov's story here. She says, "Do they have no blind people?" Right? Who would not be affected, who would not lose their sanity when the world went dark. Um, so yeah, that's um, a very good question, right? And certainly they would have to include that. But one thing that I would say in response to this passage is that um, I disbelieve in this explanation. I don't believe that Sheeran is correct. The the um, the bias, right? The disdain with which he speaks of this. The Book of Revelations is too exact, I think, to be the memory of 6-year-old children and half-mad morons, right? Um, there's clearly more to it than that. He seems to want to cast disdain upon it. Um, because, see, this is the thing that's been brewing from the very beginning of the story, right? Remember, what's the public mad about? The public is mad because these scientists seem to be pointing back to the cult beliefs, and society has finally moved past the cult beliefs, right? As the prospect of the darkness actually comes closer, the beliefs of the cult become more, not less threatening, right? If the cult was right about the 2050 years and about the darkness coming across Beta, if it seems like maybe this is actually some kind of an accurate record, how confident can we be about the stars? Maybe they're right about the stars too. Can we be sure they're not right about the stars? We don't want to think. It's clear the people in the story don't want to think that, right? Aton is violently against it. But remember, the stars are the weak point in their scientific explanation. They can't explain stars. That is they have no fact that they can point to explain it. So the only explanation of stars that's out there is the cult's explanation, right? Um, this is where Tina, I also find it really interesting. Tina says, did they record that there were in fact billions of stars, not the 24 the photographer imagined? Apparently not, right? Or at least nothing in the Book of Revelations appears to prepare anyone for the actual visual spectacle that they receive when the eclipse happens. So that does not seem to be recorded, which I think is interesting. In as much as even that detail of the mouth of the cave, just like the eclipse, right? The description of the solar eclipse is, I mean, that's fairly detailed, right? But we get nothing like that about this. So yeah, they do say that they're countless, Tina, but again, they don't. But there's no description of it exactly? Right? I don't know. Um, yeah, April says that Revelations discusses the stars being revealed. The stars are the revelations. Yes, exactly. Um, uh, by the way, does anybody know the Greek word for revelation? This is a trick question. Anybody know the Greek word for revelation? Apocalypse. Yeah, exactly. Apocalypse. Apocalypso. That's what the word revelation means. So the attachment of the concept of apocalypse to the end of the world is accidental in a sense. That is, it's not wholly accidental, but kind of accidental. That is, the last book of the New Testament, which is, of course, written in Greek, is called the Apocalypse of St. John the Divine. That's the Greek word that is the title, the revelation of the revelation of Jesus Christ to St. John the Divine. So it's called the apocalypse, and it describes the end of the world, right? So that's where the association between apocalypse and the end of the world came from. But apocalypse, the denotation of the word apocalypse, is not end of the world. Eschaton is the Greek word for the end of the world. Apocalypse means a revelation, an unfolding, right? An uncovering, literally. Um, uh, Calypso, like the nymph or the goddess with whom Odysseus hung out for a while, right? Calypso means to cover, to hide. Apocalypso, right, means to uncover, to reveal. So, April, I'm coming back to your point about the book of Revelations, right? The title of the book suggests the really important thing is what is going to be revealed. The stars are the essence of the thing, right? What is revealed? What is the apocalypse that happens at the eclipse? The stars. It's the stars that are revealed. They've been there all along, right? But now all of a sudden they are revealed to the sight of the people of Lagash. So there is an apocalypse, a revelation involved, right? But April, as you say, it's the revelations plural, right? All of the stars are revealed. It's this countless revelations, right? Yeah, and yet, and this I think is one of the things that Latimer is saying when is thinking about and talking about when he says you're deluded, right? Um, your 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 facts are fraudulent. You're stripping it. You're stripping the facts of their true significance. The true significance. It's all about the stars. And again, the scientists have no answer um, about the stars. Um, yeah, yeah. Um, okay. All right. Um, we're moving into the big finish here. Two more slides. Two more slides. Almost done. Um, how many times have you seen me get through 20 slides before? Right. These one shots are really challenging. I can't wrap it over till next week. But look, see, we've done. We're only 12 minutes over, and we've already done 18. So, by the way, the donations are going to be closing. We're almost up to $1,500 for tonight. That's really great. It looks like we are still, yep, 510 is still the leading donation so far, I believe. Yep. So thanks for confirming that. Yep. So if you wanna top the current leader, it's your last chance. And then we'll do the drawing for the books too. But first, the big finish. All right, the stars. With the slow fascination of fear, he lifted himself on one arm and turned his eyes toward the blood-curdling blackness of the window. Through it shone the stars. Not Earth's feeble 3,600 stars visible to the eye. Lagash was in the center of a giant cluster. 30,000 mighty suns shone down in a soul-searing splendor that was more frighteningly cold in its awful indifference than the bitter wind that shivered across the cold, horribly bleak world. Theramon staggered to his feet, his throat constricting him to breathlessness, all the muscles of his body writhing in an intensity of terror and sheer fear beyond bearing. He was going mad and knew it, and somewhere deep inside a bit of sanity was screaming, struggling to fight off the hopeless flood of black terror. It was very horrible to go mad and know that you were going mad, to know that in a little minute you would be here physically, and yet all the real essence would be dead and drowned in the black madness. For this was the dark and the cold and the doom. The bright walls of the universe were shattered, and their awful black fragments were falling down to crush and squeeze and obliterate him. Yeah. Um, April says this is straight up cosmic horror. The astronomers can't comprehend that they missed such a thing as the stars. On the other hand, the cosmic indifference of all these stars, the insignificance of the people on Lagash is unsupportable. Yes, notice the notice the language in which notice the imagery that he uses. Yes, Dime, the dark, the cold, and the doom. It does sound really heavy, doesn't it? Like you can feel it closing in on them, right? And again, notice the irony. I'm already forgetting who it was that pointed out the irony. Carolyn, was it you? The irony of how they live in a really small, they believe in a very small universe, right? They believe in this little closed-in universe, and yet they are claustrophobic, right? They're afraid of enclosed spaces. And there is a really fun irony there. Notice how that irony turns around here. Now when their universe is thrown open, now when they can see, oh my gosh, look at all those suns, look at how huge everything is, it all closes in. This is what leads them to experience the claustrophobia, right? Yeah, yeah. Good. Yeah, Tina, the Earth's 3,600 stars makes it sound like they may know of Earth. Yes, maybe, or just the Earth narrator. Again, I have a hard time feeling that the narrator of this story is really consistently sort of operating within that secondary world. But yeah, certainly another Earth framework. Yeah, I agree, Arthur. That does, or James, it does feel like it kind of breaks the wall there. But again, that I felt from the beginning, because and that doesn't seem to me a blemish. I don't consider that a blemish. This story doesn't. This story, as the story is articulated, doesn't make any claim to be sort of living within its own frame. Yeah, yeah. Anyway, okay. But notice the language. Notice the. What does it sound like? Hang on, let's do it again. It was very horrible to go mad and know that you were going mad, to know that in a little minute you would be here physically, and yet all the real essence would be dead and drowned in the black madness. Sound familiar? Yeah, James. It's almost like their souls are departing from them, right? Leaving only the bestial remnant. Yeah, exactly. It's almost like that. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, Wes Sean says it's like salvation inverted, right? Yeah. Back to the book of Revelations, right? The book of Revelations is right. It's right. And the cultist was right to say that the facts that the scientist had found out stripped them of their true significance. Even though they predicted this, right? They were saying from the beginning, it's the end of the world, right? Civilization as we know it is not going to exist tomorrow. Everything's going to be destroyed. We're all going to go insane, right? They accurately predicted what was going to happen. So you could say, well, no, like they knew, right? They knew. No, they didn't. Not really. I mean, that is, they didn't. The experience is not of those who knew and anticipated what it would be, right? Even think about the little experiment that those two, two of the scientists had made to try to imitate like the coming of stars, right? And they're like, it was fine, right? Didn't affect them. Um, can you see why? See why the star experience didn't work? In the dark room that they went into, which was creepy, the dark room, when they turned on the stars, they were just lights, right? Oh, look, it's light. It's kind of nice. Better than the darkness. It's less dark now, right? As if the light, if stars are light, then they must, break the darkness, fight the darkness, save us from the darkness, right? Especially if there are this many stars. I mean, notice the irony here. Notice the turn. When the dark comes, what happens? Where are they? In light. Look at the 30,000 mighty suns shone down in a soul-searing splendor. That's not imagery of darkness, right? We do get the dark and the cold and the doom later on, but 30,000 mighty suns shone down in a soul-searing splendor, right? Light. It's not, in a sense, it's not darkness that undoes them. It's the light, right? Yeah. So again, this is why the star experiment was a failure, right? The cold, indifferent splendor. Exactly, James. Exactly. But again, it's just like the book of Revelations, right? The stars coming down, it is like the stars are coming down. 30,000 mighty suns shone down with soul-searing splendor. Yeah. Just like the cultists described. Just like the book of Revelations. Book of Revelations, totally right. Right? Some of their language, some of their imagery might be a little bit fanciful, maybe, right? It's not literally a cave, right? But on a deeper sense, they're quite right about the cave, right? It makes everybody, what happens is everyone on the planet feels like they would feel in a cave, right? Which no one ever goes into, right? That would be insane. Yeah. Now, Arthur, you're right that, well, in a sense, it's not a physical phenomenon that makes them insane. Arthur's specifying it's a spiritual crisis. Yeah, the mystics were closer to being exactly. That's the mystery, right? And yeah, exactly, Brandon. Soul searing. That's, you can't not think of Revelations there, right? The quotation from the cultist. Yeah. Last passage. Aton, somewhere, was crying, whimpering horribly like a terribly frightened child. Stars! Oh, the stars! We didn't know at all! We didn't know anything! We thought 6 stars in a universe is something this... Notice how his grammar, his syntax starts breaking down? We thought 6 stars in a universe something the stars didn't notice is darkness forever and ever and ever, and the walls are breaking in, and we didn't know, we couldn't know, and anything! Someone clawed at the torch, and it fell and snuffed out. In the instant, the awful splendor of the indifferent stars leaped nearer to them. On the horizon outside the window, in the direction of Cerro City, a crimson glow began growing, strengthening in brightness that was not the glow of a sun. The long night had come again. That is such an awesome ending. Oh my gosh. Now for wrath, now for ruin, and the world's ending. Indeed. Notice again, though, the stars don't really come down. Well, that's their experience, right? And notice how we get that imagery even more strongly here, right? As soon as the last torch goes out, the awful splendor of the indifferent stars leaped nearer to them, right? Yeah. The stars are coming down. Whatever has been recorded in the book of Revelation is not merely fact. It is the experience, right? that is, and I mean, it becomes clearer than ever, right, at the end, that the Book of Revelations is clearly an eyewitness account, right? Clearly an eyewitness account. Um, yeah, yeah. Um, Kate Neville says it's ironic that they were fearing the dark and it was the stars which drove them mad. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Um, yeah, Arthur, I agree. There is Arthur following up on his previous observation. Um, it is an unexpected ending. Um, for an Asimov story, right? That um, we have this conflict between the religious fanatics and the scientists, and at the end, it kind of seems like the religious fanatics were right, right? Um, I think just to say it that way is an oversimplification, right? But what I think that this does show, um, I can't help but take away from this a a sort of an indication of the power of myth, right? The power of these ideas, the psychological situation that Sheeran was trying to describe, right? Um, that's a reality. Think about the people of the tunnel, right? When he was talking about the people of the tunnel, that is those subset of people who went crazy in the tunnel of mystery, right? And who came out and were had a claustrophobic fixation and refused ever to go inside again, right? Um, it sounds like when they're talking about them, right? They make it sound like those people are the deluded ones, right? Like they've lost touch with reality. At the end of the story, we kind of see that turned around. It's as if, no, now, again, the cultist was right. Now the true significance of things is revealed, right? There is more to it than just facts. Um, yeah, yeah. Um, And yeah, Wes says that bright walls are shattered, but they put the fragments back together each time. Language seems to survive the night. Yes, um, I think it becomes really clear at the end that the Book of Revelations is not the product of children and half-mad morons, right? Um, the scientists, were wanting to hand down what they knew and what they learned so that the same cycle wouldn't repeat again. If the next time people knew this stuff way in advance and they could calculate and they would have as much time as they needed, right? Hundreds of years to prepare for the eclipse so that everyone would know what's coming and they could work on artificial lights, right? And have everything ready and it's all good. But you get the sense that like they're not the first ones to try this trick, right? That maybe some of the other societies have also tried handing down knowledge, and what remains is the Book of Revelations. Um, Facts, yes. Scientific facts, yes. But scientific facts with the real significance, that is, with the sense of the experience of the moment added into it, so that it comes to sound like mere mysticism, right? So Arthur, I don't actually think that the cycle has been broken here. Um, I think that it's what we're seeing is, in my mind, what we see at the end is like this is what the Book of Revelations is too accurate, right? Um, I think it is. I think it is the record. It is the record. It is all that remains of the records that they have attempted to retain, that previous societies have attempted to retain. Um, really, really neat. But again, I come back to where we started, right? The imaginative leap that a story is asking us to make, a science fiction story, we have to try to put ourselves into this world. And in the end, what do we see? That gap between really experiencing something and just trying to project yourself into something. The mere contemplation of fact. I am reading a story about a planet with 6 suns. Okay, this planet Legosh has 6 suns. Isn't that interesting? That's just fact, right? But you've got to try to get it. You've got to try to get at the real significance. To really put yourself there, what would it be like to live on a planet with 6 suns? And the story develops that, right? And then in the end, what do we see? This thing that they thought that they understood still blows their mind in exactly the way that they were expecting it to blow their mind, and yet unimaginably, right? And the last words that we hear from the chief scientist, our representative scientist, is, "We didn't know, we couldn't know," right? Exactly. So, I love how that kind of maps onto our own experience, right? As we're seeing this happen now unfolding, and so we're kind of experiencing it along with them, and yet there's that sense of distance. Like we may think, by the end of the story, we may think that we've put ourselves into that frame of reference imaginatively, but we haven't, right? We can't. Anyway, really, really fun, really, really cool to think about. Thanks very much for suggesting this. Thank Tom Hillman was the guy who nominated this. A bunch of people on our Council of the Wise, our nominating committee, nominated different things. Lots of really great suggestions. I would have liked to pursue more of them, but anyway, I ended up. So I chose this one because we'd never done any Asimov before, and I'm like, cool, an Asimov short story. It sounds perfect. So thanks, Tom, for suggesting this. This was really, really fun to talk about. So we're done. We're well over time tonight, so I suspected we would be. These one-shots tend to be a little bit long because I can't, as I said, I can't hold it over till next week. Escape Pod, James. Escape Pod is the name of the podcast. It's I think it was the 500th episode of Escape Pod that they do science fiction stories. It was recorded back in 2007. So excellent. Oh, the 100th episode. Thank you, not the 500th, the 100th episode. Great. Thank you, Caroline. Yeah, it's very well done. You can go. You can Google it. There's a link to it, I think, on the event page too. If you go to our campaign event page for tonight, I think there's a link to it there as well. All right, very good. So our $510 donation is our winner of the election or the auction. So I'll be getting in touch with you about your choice for your personal choice for a Mythgard class. That'll be a lot of fun. A Mythgard Academy class. Again, either a one shot or a short one. We'll discuss. So I'll be in touch with you by email, and let me do the drawing here. So let's see. Okay. All right. I've got. I'm doing my my randomization here. Okay. All right. Doing some calculations. All right, and I'm going to go up and let's see. All right. And the winner is, all right. I think my math was correct here. The winner is April Cleaver. Congratulations, April. You have won the drawing tonight, and you'll get your very own copy of the history of the Lord of the Rings. So I'll send you an email too. I'll make sure to get address information from you, and get those sent right out to you. Just in case you need them at some point, they might possibly come in handy. Thanks, everybody, for joining me. This was a lot of fun. I hope that you will be able to come back and join me for other events on Monday of this coming week. Next Monday, I'm going to be doing a discussion with Ted Naismith and in particular, we're talking about the wonderful painter and Tolkien artist, illustrator of the annotated Silmarillion. And I'm going to be talking with him about visually imagining the Silmarillion. We're going to be talking about that, of course, in the context of the Silmarillion film project. Well, tomorrow, technically, Saturday, I'm going to be doing my marathon stream of the adventures of Griffith the Burglar. As in Lord of the Rings Online, we go through Moria. So if you are interested in the work of adaptation that the Lord of the Rings Online has done, and I hope that those of you who haven't played the game are willing to actually kind of give that a try, because I will say, and I've said this before, the Lord of the Rings Online video game is the best, smartest adaptation of Tolkien I have seen in any medium, anywhere. I am just immensely, immensely impressed with the incredible, careful reading and thoughtful work that the designers of the Lord of the Rings Online have done with Tolkien's corpus. It is it's not just like slightly better; it's enormously better than any other adaptation I've ever seen. So I really enjoy doing it. So if you want to see what they do with Moria, come join me on Saturday on twitch.tv/LotroStream. You can find the link on the event page there as well. Very good. Anyway, thanks everybody again for joining us, and I hope to see you guys again soon. We're going to do another. So in addition to continuing the Dispossessed, which we'll be doing, for on our regular Wednesday night time slot, we're also going to be doing another special Mythgard Academy class during the webathon on Sunday, October 30th, the final event of our fall fundraising campaign. And what I'm thinking about for that, I'm thinking about another thing that was nominated on by the Council of the Wise, the new Netflix series Stranger Things. I've been watching that, and I'm really interested to talk about that. So I think we're going to talk about Stranger Things during the webathon. So that'll be really fun. So I hope you'll be able to come back for that too. And yeah, Lynn, if you want to see the any of my Griffith stream, just go to the website and you can watch it live. You don't have to log in or anything. So you don't have to play the game. You don't have to log in. You just have to go to you can just navigate to the website and watch it live. Anyway, so Stranger Things later on, Dispossessed next week and the week after that, and we'll have plenty to talk about. Plus, I will be announcing soon our new the one chosen by our auction winner here tonight. So we'll see what that ends up being too. I'm all aquiver with anticipation. Thanks everybody. Have a good night now. Bye.